On today's show, the Cleveland Cavaliers look to continue their winning streak. They've got a big matchup on Tuesday night with the Boston Celtics, plus a rematch with the Detroit Pistons on the road Wednesday, and they wrap up the week in D.C. against the worst team in the NBA, the Washington Wizards. We'll talk about all that on this edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching this on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode, of course, sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. That is code LOCKEDONNBA. Great show lined up. John Karalis of Locked On Celtics joins me first. We talk about Boston, what they're going through this season. We did speak prior to their big comeback win against Philadelphia on Sunday night, so nothing about that game is in this podcast episode, but we talked about the Celtics season, but of the January doldrums that they went through in addition to kind of what the Cavs went through as well. So good conversation there. Then joined by Khahil, does a great job over at Locked On Pistons. We talked to him last week before the Cavs hosted the Detroit Pistons, caught up with him again. Maybe do the Pistons look a little different? Maybe they make a trade before Wednesday night's matchup. And then, of course, conclude the show with Brandon Scott from Locked On Wizards. We talk a ton about where Washington is headed and how that roster might look a little bit different when Friday's game is played after the NBA trade deadline. So we've got all that straight ahead for you. But first, I do need to make sure that you sign up for the Locked On Cavs daily newsletter because it is your one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. You can sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That is LockedOnDaily.com. And now, here's John Karalis. And back on Locked On Cavs is John Karalis. Does a great job covering the Boston Celtics over at Locked On Celtics. And John, the Celtics, just like the Cavs, had a little bit of faux outrage surrounding the team because gasp, they weren't playing at a 65-win pace for about a 2.5, 3-week stretch. Are the Celtics done finally being bored with the regular season and playing good basketball again, or should we continue to pretend to panic about a really good team?
I think we can take down the panic a couple of notches, but you can still pretend to be annoyed by them. I've always said with this stretch for the Celtics that a few things have been happening. They have been a little bit bored with the whole process, I think. Other teams have just been coming in and playing their absolute best. Guys are having monster games. Dylan Brooks was 10 of 15 from three. Trey Murphy was 8 of 12 from three. Guys are having these career nights against Boston. So that doesn't help when the Celtics aren't at their absolute best. They can went into a huge shooting slump, and Kristaps Porzingis was working his way back. I think Porzingis is kind of back to his normal self, and I think you're seeing some of the side effect of that Derek White is back to his normal self because he's playing off of Porzingis better. We're starting to see normal rotations. We're starting to see better spacing. We're starting to see better Celtics basketball. It doesn't mean that they aren't going to have lapses. I think defensively, they're probably going to have, they're going to make some mistakes unless they're motivated, which they will be against the Cavs. I think that's going to be one of the games where the Celtics say, okay, this is the top seed. This is going to be, a TNT game, and we want to play our absolute best. So you will see your best against the Celtics. Now, will you see the Celtics at their best against the Sixers? Maybe not. It depends on who they have out there. Will you see the Celtics at their best against other teams that they aren't chasing in the standings? Maybe not. But I know that they'll be at their best against the Cavs. So that'll be a fun one.
So I've been around teams in the past, very early in my career, that didn't necessarily take the regular season as seriously as most teams do. And they sort of had the mentality that they could just flip the switch when the postseason arrives. And of course, I'm talking about the LeBron era Cavs after they won the title, where, that 2016-17 team did not care in the regular season. And then they were just an absolute juggernaut in the Eastern Conference playoffs before getting to the finals and seeing Kevin Durant on the Golden State Warriors, which definitely changed things. Do you view, not to say that this Celtics team is like that, but do you view them as a group that thinks that when the games start to matter more in April, May, and potentially June, that they can just flip a switch and be back to what they were as a title team last year?
I think they think they can do that. And I think they believe that they can start doing that soon, probably post All-Star break. But you've heard them say a number of times, we know what it takes to win around here. So it makes me feel like they know the Porzingis thing. They know that the other teams are geared up to play the Celtics like a playoff team. And even Porzingis, said a couple of weeks ago, or on their West Coast swing, like we can't trick ourselves to pretend this is playoff intensity basketball. So I think when it gets closer and they start to understand, okay, now we're going to make a little bit of a run. This is our chance. I think they will try harder. And again, I think the try harder part is on the defensive end. So, and to be fair, like Porzingis being back and at his normal self does improve them defensively, because he is a rim protector, just like in the mold of an Evan Mobley, where just him being back there scares people from even coming into the paint, or when they get into the paint and they see Porzingis there, they don't want to take shots, or they take wild shots, and you don't necessarily need to have blocks or anything like that. So look, the Celtics have been in this stretch where they've been struggling, a top 5 offense and defense in the NBA. They've been one of the worst clutch teams in the NBA. And I think that's where the effort part comes in. They just kind of stop. They don't ramp up. They don't put it into fifth. When other teams do, the Celtics haven't. And you saw it against the Cavs in the last game, where Donovan Mitchell scored 20 in the fourth quarter. So that's been the Celtics' biggest weakness. So even with everything that I'm saying, I think the Celtics have been pretty good. There's probably like 5 plays per game, all in the last 5 minutes this year, that they are not making that they made last year. And I think that's just the big difference.
Do you think that is something that fans should be concerned about with that team? Or is this just, I don't want to call it a regular season malaise, but is there anything else that you look at and say, you know what, that is something that would concern me about this version of the Boston Celtics? Or is it just regular season stuff?
Yeah, no, I think anytime a team struggles in the clutch like that, there has to be a little bit of concern, even if we can say, I think they'll figure it out, and this is part of the process of them. This is a new season, even though it's mostly the same guys. It's a new season, and they have to figure that out again. I still think there is some concern because, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum will have some really bad turnovers. And you're like, what? When did you forget? Did somebody hit you in the head in the last time out? Like, why are you doing this now all of a sudden? They won't be able to get to the shots that they want. All of a sudden, their offense bogs down and becomes more predictable, which makes them easier to defend. And that's something that I think they need to work past. So it is a little bit concerning, because what you want from a team that's doing the stuff that we've been talking about is you cruise through the first 3 quarters, even if you're behind. Fourth quarter, you come back, and in the clutch, you actually wake up, you try for 5 minutes, you become the Boston freaking Celtics, the world champs, and you put a team away, and people go, oh, okay, that the cruising for 36 minutes was just them being bored. And then the last 12 minutes, especially the last 5, is championship caliber stuff. And they're not doing that part. And that's where you worry about bad habits and that stuff creeping in. And so we'll see. They just had a decent win, even though the Pelicans were completely decimated. It was they executed in the last minute, and that is a positive step, regardless of who it was against. So hopefully that's part of a turnaround for Boston.
And then the other thing, of course, the trade deadline is rapidly approaching. It'll be this Thursday. Do you believe Boston is a team that we need to look at as could be making a move? And do you think they should be thinking about making a move before the deadline?
So I know they have a deal if they want it to get Jaden Springer out. If they were willing to trade just a second round pick, they have destinations where he can go to save some money. But Springer has been kind of a little bit of a revelation over the past couple weeks, starting with the game in LA against the Clippers. The Celtics defense, as I've been saying, is kind of lacking a little bit. And Springer is, if nothing else, an incredible point of attack defender, physical, get his hand on the ball and really make it hell. If the Celtics are having any sort of trouble with Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland, I wouldn't be surprised to see Jaden Springer take a turn on one of those guys just to make them bringing the ball up difficult and just to throw a little different energy into the game. And that's important. So I went from thinking that Springer might go and maybe they could try to find a little bit of a cheap shooter or some kind of offensive production off the bench. But now I really am thinking that the Celtics, like, the most that they'll do if they're desperate to save some money is maybe move Xavier Tillman in a financial deal for nothing. I think they should keep Jaden Springer now. And it's just that little extra wrinkle of, like I said, if Darius Garland is going off and no one on the Celtics cares to stop him, you throw Springer in there to, defend him for 3 minutes and at least throw him off his rhythm. And it will border on fouling him every time he touches the ball, but it's that physical kind of defense that if the Celtics are a little disinterested on that side, well, now Jaden Springer's picking up full court and he's making it difficult for the opposing guards. Now Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum have to look at that and be like, oh God, I got to keep up with this kid. And it does raise the energy for the Celtics. So he has suddenly become a little bit of an important kind of like wild card type of like a turbo boost. Like in a video game, you're playing one of those racing games and you have 3 turbos to use. Like you want to use one, but you want to keep him around. You want to have him there. He's like that little turbo boost to maybe like get the Celtics kind of back into gear.
I love that comparison. I think that's a great way to put it, John. Very much appreciate you taking the time to do this before the Cavs take on the Celtics for the third of 4 times this season as Boston comes to Cleveland on Tuesday night. Thanks so much, John.
You got it, man.
Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Are you looking for tickets to your next big event, whether it's a concert, maybe you want to go see that comedian that's coming to town, or even a game, like, I don't know, maybe Tuesday night you want to go to that game? Well, finding the right ticket at the right price can never be, it can be a headache, but with Game Time picks, they take that headache away. It's never been easier by using Game Time picks. With what they do is the app does all the hard work for you. They sift through the thousands and thousands and thousands of ticket inventory that they have, and they find only the best deal. That's what Game Time picks is. They filter out the fluff. They give you the best stuff. The curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price, and you don't have to sift through the thousands of different options. Plus, the seat view feature, it's a game changer. Before you hit buy, you'll know exactly what your seat's going to look like no matter what the venue you're in. It's a very reassuring thing. It takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Plus, with Game Time's lowest price guarantee, if you find a better deal somewhere else, they will refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something does come up. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA, that is LOCKEDON NBA, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA, $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And he had so much fun last week on the show. Khahil of Locked On Pistons wanted to come back, talk about the Detroit Pistons as the Cavs Go to Detroit for the first time this year. Second night of a back-to-back for Cleveland as they take on Boston Tuesday, Detroit on Wednesday. And the timing of this matchup is really interesting because the trade deadline, you may have heard, is coming up this Thursday, which means the Cavs and Pistons play the day before then. Do you expect this Pistons team to be one that is going to be active and potentially making a move prior to Thursday's deadline?
Yeah, I think they're going to try to get Wemby from the Spurs now after what happened yesterday. We're going to be just, I think teams are just going to start calling every major superstar under the age of 25 and see if their team just wants to give them away now. But all seriousness, well, I say that, but it actually happened. No, the Pistons, they have $14 million in cap space. They're the only team in the league with like literal cap space heading into the deadline. So they are going to do something. It's guaranteed that they will do something, whether it's absorb a contract to get some assets or trade for a guy that can actually help this year or make a bigger swing. We don't know exactly what trade they're going to make. It seems like, from what I understand over the last month, even the Pistons weren't sure at a moment there, like which way they were going to go. It seems like they're leaning more towards now trying to get an asset with the contract. But a trade will be happening. It's just we don't know 100% what type of trade is it going to be.
So if you were Trajan Langdon, if you were running the Detroit Pistons, and I know you do a great job if you were, but would you be more inclined to take on a contract in exchange for an asset to, grease the wheels on a bigger trade elsewhere in the league? Or would you more so be like trying to make the Pistons a team that is better suited to be competitive, not necessarily turn them into a title contender or anything this year, but be competitive or help out in that first potential playoff run that they could be looking at this spring?
I think everything would be on the table if it was me. Like I completely understand taking on a contract for an asset because Troy Weaver, the previous GM, left them with zero assets outside of their own pick, and their own pick is even top 13 protected, so they don't even really have full control of their own pick. So I completely get why they're trying to get an asset. For me, if you're going to take on a bad contract or a contract of a guy that can't really help you right now, it better be a really good asset you're getting. Like a second it wouldn't be good enough for me. Like 2 seconds wouldn't be good for me. It better be like a legit good contract. If you're just going to go out there and get, I don't know, Pat Connaughton, who I think is way past it, and I don't even know if he would play on this team. So like, if you're going to do something like that, the asset better be really good. I also think that with guys like a Zach LaVine available, I would be very interested in Zach LaVine. I know Zach LaVine and Cade are actually close, and they're cool friends. I wouldn't say close, but cool friends. They've worked out before. And I think Zach LaVine really would help this team a ton. He's exactly what Cade needs next to him. And his contract is not as bad now as it was last year. He only got 2 more years left on it. So I'd be looking at Zach LaVine. I think he's a much better option than any of these other like higher tier guys that are available. I think he's really damn good. So if I was going to take a big swing, I'd look at LaVine. If they weren't going to look big at LaVine, and I'm not too interested in taking on a contract unless I get a really good asset. If I get a legit first, and I do it. The only other one that I think is a good in-between move is like getting CJ McCollum from the Pelicans. Like that's not a swing, too heavy move. That's not, you got an all-star level player. You got a legit guy. You got a good scorer who can help you in the meanwhile. And then next year when Jaden Ivey comes back, is old enough, is a good enough veteran, only has 1 year left in his contract to where if you want to bring him off the bench for Jaden Ivey, you can. And by all accounts, he's been a fantastic veteran throughout his career, so especially with the Pelicans. So I think that's one of those ones that you would meet in between and kind of would help you short-term, long-term, and without, causing ruckus, I guess, in the locker room moving forward if you don't want to offend Jaden Ivey, I guess, when he comes back.
How important if they do make a trade, that sort of trade, not like the trade where they're just taking on a contract to get an asset, but if they do make a trade to try and better themselves in the short term, how important is it that that person can be not obviously at Cade Cunningham's level, but can be somebody that can help take some of the creation burden off of Cunningham's plate? Because in watching the Pistons and the Cavs, and, I watched one of the other Pistons games this week against the Dallas Mavericks, like Cade is remarkable, but he's kind of the only one, as you've mentioned before, I know, both here and on Locked On Pistons, he's really the only one making all this stuff happen. Like, how important is adding somebody else to that mix?
I mean, multiple games this week, we saw teams full court trapping, like legit full court trapping and full court pressing. I'm not sure if it was the Cavs. It might have been the Magic. Now, I don't really have the memory to know which team it was, but we saw a team literally employ 55 defense, high school varsity full court trap, like against Cade. I've never seen it happen in an NBA game where it's not the end of the game, where it's just like a full-on defensive, like, plan to just, as soon as they inbound the ball to Cade, we're just going to trap them and see if another guy can get the ball up the court. And the Pistons had like 5-7 turnovers off of this. Like Cade is really damn good. He's got the Pistons where they are now. They desperately, like, I don't know if there's another team that's like in this, like outside, like a really bad team. I'm talking about like a team that's in the playoff hunt. I don't know if there's another team that desperately needs another creator as much as the Pistons do. Like I never thought in my life I would see a team getting full court trapped in the NBA. That just should not be able to happen without giving up layups. And the Pistons just were not able to do it. They just had turnovers nonstop. And then in that game, we did start to see them somewhat start to employ Asar Thompson, my goodness, as a ball handler. And it's something I've been begging them to do. You draft him 5 because you believe in his playmaking and his ball handling, but then they go away from it and he just never touches the ball again. So if they don't believe Asar can be that secondary playmaker and be that secondary ball handler, I believe he can be. But if you don't believe he can be, you have to make a deal for someone that can do it, because what they're doing right now is not sustainable. And there always is going to be a part of me until this season is over and they don't actually give up the pick, or they do give up the pick. There's always going to be a part of me until the clock hits 0-0 that feels like that Trajan somewhat is sitting back like, well, if we lose a lot of games, we end up keeping our pick. That's not the worst idea ever anyway. So do I really even do anything? Like, until I see that happen, that's what I'm going to believe. But if they are trying to be a legit playoff team, they desperately need someone else that can create.
So the reason that, we're even having this conversation, Koo, is because Cade Cunningham has been so good this year. He's named an all-star last week for the first time in his career, something that I'm sure you and I both agree is very, very deserving. But what does it mean for that franchise to have somebody that's back at that level, that is back as, a no question, no doubt about it all-star for what feels like the first time in a while?
I mean, look, the first guard Piston all-star since Allen Iverson in 2009. And I don't know if AI was even deserving of that. I think that was more so just his name. That was the last year AI was an all-star. We obviously know how the next 2 years of his career went out. This is the first all-star since Blake Griffin in 2019. And before that, they had 2 all-stars from Andre Drummond in 15-16 and 17-18. And with all 3 of those guys, maybe remove Blake, but Blake was on the other end of his career. We knew it wasn't going to last too long, and it ended up lasting even shorter than it did because of a knee injury. But those other guys, even Andre, like, I don't think many people thought that he was a legit franchise player. I think people believed he was really good. He was a legit player, but a legit franchise player. I don't think the Pistons have felt like they've had a franchise player since 2008 when they had Chauncey, or, you had like franchise players like Chauncey, Ben, Rip, and like when you had all that. This is the first time the Pistons fan base has felt like they have a guy. And the kind of PR push that he got throughout like the last few weeks kind of shows that, like, how much it feels, how good it feels in Detroit to know that we have a dude that is respected. We have a dude that is actually a franchise guy, and they all are rallying behind him finally, by the way, because for a while there you were hearing Jared Goff chants at the stadium during the Lions season. Now, last game, we finally heard MVP chants for Cade. Like, you actually started to see them really get behind him now. So I think it's big time. It's absolutely huge for this team. It's absolutely huge for a team like Detroit, who has been struggling to be respected or relevant in the media space over the last, again, since Chauncey was really traded, to have this kind of push from, I mean, if you see it all over the NBA accounts tweeting about Cade, like ESPN's tweeting about Cade, like his highlights are on ESPN Sports, like he's getting a big push and Detroit is being talked about. I don't think I've seen something like this legit like in 15 years.
He's been awesome. It's been awesome to see that happen for a franchise that, as you mentioned, has not had that type of star in a really long time, in a city that I do think very, very much does appreciate basketball and their basketball team, despite chance for the starting quarterback maybe inside Little Caesars Arena. Koo, thanks so much for doing this. Very much appreciate your time, man.
Appreciate you.
Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Basketball season, well, it's heating up. I mean, it's pretty hot. I think with the trades we've seen, with all the great play we've seen on the court, basketball season, absolutely the place to be. And there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in awarded winnings, Prize Picks makes it easy and fun to turn your sports knowledge into real money. So here's how Prize Picks works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. So the best part with Prize Picks 2, they keep it simple. You can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds. Their fast, secure withdrawals mean you get paid quickly when you win. Plus, Taco Tuesday promo gives you discounted player projections for even more value. Check out the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That is LOCKEDON NBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. And back for the first time in a while, Brandon Scott of Locked On Wizards, a team that has not necessarily been the most fun to watch this year as they sit here at 7-41 on the season while we record this. However, Brandon, I know they're on a 1-game winning streak with a big win this weekend over the Minnesota Timberwolves, snapping what was a lengthy losing streak. How did that happen?
Anthony Edwards was out that night, so that's how it happened. It's been a long year, man. It's going to be a long year.
Yeah, I mean, they are a team that is obviously not playing for right now. They're playing for draft positioning. They're playing to develop young talent. They've got some really nice young pieces that are obviously not ready to win. But what have you seen throughout the course of these 48 games that I'm sure have been very painful so far as the development of young talent? Like, what has that process looked like in Washington?
Well, the young talent, you see progress. You know, number 2 overall pick for this previous draft, Alex Sarr, he's gotten better every week. Just like Bilal Coulibaly, you know, the guy we grabbed last year's draft. Both of them very raw coming out of draft, but you saw progress offensively, both of them. Defense was the first part of the games that we kind of expected progress. Alex Sarr, the rim protector, Bilal Coulibaly, his ability to kind of lock down and guard every position from 1 to 5. Are the hallmarks of their game, but both of them have gotten better. You know, Bilal Coulibaly, his offense is coming along. You know, definitely a mid-range game, improved 3-point shot, finishing through traffic, finishing through contact. And then with Alex Sarr, he's at 7'1", he relies on his jump shot a little too much at 7'1". I kind of want to see him get more active in the paint, but he has been doing a lot better with getting in the paint, playing with his back to the basket, and becoming a better rebounder. Because when he played in Australia, rebounding wasn't his, you know, wasn't where you wanted him to be. But now, you know, you're starting to see that potential with him as a rebounder.
Do you look at either of those guys as potential guys that could be franchise players, or are you looking at those guys as, hey, you know, maybe this Washington team gets lucky in the draft lottery because no matter how much they lose, and I think at this point they are locked into having one of the 3 worst records in basketball, but with the lottery odds being flattened, they're guaranteed no better than 14% chance at the number 1 overall pick. So let's say they do get lucky there, or don't get lucky there even, I guess. Do you view either of those guys as a potential franchise cornerstone, or are those guys that could potentially be really nice fits alongside somebody like Cooper Flagg if they do win the draft lottery this upcoming spring?
When it comes to Bilal Coulibaly and Alex Sarr, I see them as being complements. Now, do I see star potential? Absolutely. Both of them have massive star potential, in my opinion. But I think they're complements. If you look at in the draft coming up, I mean, Cooper Flagg is, you know, easy at number 1. Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, they all have franchise-altering talent. So, if we can grab one of those guys, I think we grab a guy who could be the face. Now, could Bilal be a face too? Yeah, I think when you look at the faces of the team, you easily could look at, you know, player in the 2025 NBA draft and Bilal Coulibaly and Alex Sarr. But it really depends on certain factors. I mean, because if we fall out the top 3, then you're probably looking at Deneen and BYU. You're probably looking at, VJ Edgecombe. And those are not guys who really are going to be, you know, face the franchise type players. So when you're looking at obtain a face the franchise, if you don't get one of the top 3 in this draft, or next year when you're looking at Cam Boozer or Debonsa, then you're probably looking at, you know, them eventually making that Donovan Mitchell type of trade. And that's why draft capital is so important in DC, because not only when it comes to, acquiring young talent through the draft, but also gaining that one big move when you want to go from a good team to a great team and start contending, which we're probably looking at 2 more years before we get to that point. But the next couple drafts are very, very important.
Yes, that is. I mean, if you're a Wizards fan, that is certainly what you're looking at, and that's how teams are just built in the NBA these days. But I do also, you bring up draft capital, and I think that the Wizards are, breaking news here, going to be sellers at this trade deadline. Like, they're not going to be a team that's looking to add stuff. They're looking to add draft capital by trading away players. We are recording this. It is 8:20 on Sunday night. So as we record this, nothing has happened. Something might happen between now and the time this podcast comes out on Monday, but it is 8:20 Eastern time Sunday night as we are talking at this moment. The Cavs and the Wizards, of course, play Friday. The trade deadline, as you might know, is Thursday. So this all leads me to ask, what players on the Wizards do you think are unlikely to be on the roster when they take the floor Friday night in DC against the Cavs?
Man, that's a hard question. I'm going to tell you why, because there is a scenario where you could see all three of these guys on the team, but there's a scenario where you can also see all three of these guys being traded. It's really a case-by-case thing where you're looking at Kyle Kuzma. I think he does have trade value. Now, last year we had an asking price of 2 first-round picks. That ain't going to happen. And with his dip in production and injury issues, you're probably not getting a first-round pick. But with recent comments he's made in the press and with visible, body language and him asking out, they feel compelled. They're going to move him. From what I've learned within the organization, he's going to be gone. They're going to move him by the deadline. Looking at Jonas Valanciunas, he has value. Since he's come over to Washington, he's been productive. Now, at his age, you could tell he's definitely declining in certain areas. He's not the same Jonas Valanciunas from Memphis, Toronto, or New Orleans. So he's definitely missed a step, but he's a guy who can still hit the mid-range. At times can still hit that 3-point shot. He brings toughness. Being a veteran guy can definitely bring mentorship to a younger team, even though I think that he's probably going to be a contending team that picks him up. So I think both of them would definitely be on the move by the deadline. Now, looking at Malcolm Brogdon, it's not so much production. He's a good player, former 6th Man of the Year award winner, but he's always hurt. And he's been hurt 2-3 times a year for Wizards. And with a price tag of 22.5, I see many teams being very hesitant to take on that contract, even though it is an aspiring contract. But do you really want to take on $22.5 million for a guy who may not even be available down the stretch run? So I can see Malcolm Brogdon staying past the deadline, and that's cool because we have young guards and Bob Carrington and Jordan Poole. He can be a mentor. He's aspiring contract, so he's not going to hold us down. But Kyle Kuzma, it behooves you to move him because, Jordan Poole, I call him JP13. He's taken over as that voice in the locker room, and Bilal Coulibaly's ready to be that second fiddle. So the writing's on the wall for Kyle Kuzma, and with the bad body language and him kind of making it known that he wants to be moved, it behooves him to move him. And Jonas Valanciunas, could the trade for Luka kind of change that? I'm gonna say yeah, because prospective trades for Jonas Valanciunas to the Lakers, we wanted those 2 second-round picks from 2025 and players such as Gabe Vincent, and now with the draft capital kind of out of the window with that deal, could it be a little harder to see him go to the Lakers? Absolutely, but I think he definitely has value. He's a guy who definitely can produce, and he can definitely be a good center for a contending team.
Is there a world where you think Jordan Poole could get traded? Because he was the one name that you didn't bring up there. You brought up 3 other ones. I was a little surprised you didn't talk about Jordan Poole much.
Well, he's much liked by the organization and by the fan base right now. He's a guy who last year, up and down season, definitely not the best season for him overall, but you saw potential in the second half. When he became the 6th man, he flourished. When Tyus Jones went down with an injury, he flourished. So in the offseason, he put in the work. He's playing at an all-star level, in my opinion. He's played really good basketball. We know team performance is going to hinder him becoming an all-star, but Jordan Poole, the Denver Nuggets did have interest in him and Jonas Valanciunas early, about last month. So he's going to have trade value. He's a guy who hasn't hit his prime yet. He's on the fringe of being an all-star, and he's a microwave scorer. So he's definitely going to have some trade interest. But I think the Wizards are going to be very hesitant right now because they want to see what they have in him, at least for the next couple of years. And the big reason I say in the next couple of years is, once you hit the final year of his contract, the year after that, Bilal Coulibaly comes up for an extension. So, and that's where money comes into play. Do you want to sign Jordan Poole to that max contract? And so there's a lot of questions, but are they going to shop him? Absolutely. Right now, they're currently shopping him, but I think they're going to retain him for at least the next couple of years.
Well, they will be a team to keep an eye on this week as the trade buzz continues to swirl around the league. I don't think they'll be able to do anything quite as big as what we saw this weekend with Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis, but I'd be surprised if the Washington Wizards aren't involved in anything before their matchup with the Cavs on Friday. Brandon, thanks so much for doing this, man. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Anytime.
Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcast. Do me a favor. Make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you thumbs up that YouTube video. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and hit that notification bell on YouTube so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. The Cavs take on the Celtics tomorrow night. I'll be back tomorrow morning talking plenty about that matchup because it's going to be one that you don't want to miss. Keep it locked right here on Locked On Cavs.